Good morning, guys. Lot more of you here than I was expecting. I thought we would have tired you out last night with the party, but good job. You made it. I barely made it, so here we are. Nice to see all of you. Good to be back at ECC again. I feel like I've been giving talks at this event every few years, or every year for the last few years, and the event just keeps getting better and better. So thanks so much for having us out. And today we are going to talk about Uniswap, DeFi, and the future of consumer finance. Everyone is trying to solve the future of consumer finance. We do think that DeFi is going to have a huge impact on that in terms of throughput, liquidity, freedom for users all over the world with an internet connection, no matter where they're from. These are all huge, kind of solvable problems that DeFi is addressing every single day. And Uniswap is super excited to be sort of at the forefront of that. And we're doing a lot of work, actually, to work closely with these kind of think of them as like consumer financial applications. So you've got like the PayPals and the E-Trades and the Robin Hoods of the world. We're trying to put Uniswap and the rest of DeFi sort of right there in those applications that the users are already using so that we can bring the dream of sort of open 100% uptime liquidity to the whole world. So just in case any of you don't know what Uniswap is, I put this little slide in here, but ultimately, at its base layer, Uniswap is a decentralized marketplace for buying and selling tokens on Ethereum. It's a protocol that powers any token to any token transaction in a Web3 environment. Okay, so we're gonna start with a couple of assumptions if we're gonna think about the world of consumer finance, where it's heading, and what that means. And the first big assumption is that all value will be tokenized. I think that we've seen this play out in lots of different ways, from real estate technologies being basically tokenized to stocks, securities. We've seen all kinds of interesting NFTs emerge. Anything that's a commodity or a currency can and will be tokenized. Not just because we think it's fun, but actually because tokenization is a better way of keeping track of a lot of these things. Not everything. There's some things that I hear about that become tokenized, and I just say that just isn't right. But we're not covering those things here today. All value that needs to move can and will be tokenized and be able to interact with the DeFi environments that we've all been working on over the last few years. So this is our first big assumption. The second big assumption is that protocols will eat everything. We have already seen this kind of come to play. Uniswap has had several days in the last year where we were outperforming Coinbase in terms of volume. I think we have 25 employees, and Coinbase has 1,200 or something like that. And so this idea that protocols, that you can build them, you can put them out there onto the blockchain, and they will just start to run, is really happening. I like to joke that my title at Uniswap Labs is actually growth lead, and I just think this is the best title ever that I picked for myself, because I'm the growth lead of something that's growing itself. And so protocols eating everything is a crucial component to everything that we're trying to do within the consumer financial world, because we have to believe this is true. We know this is true. We have to get them to believe it's true as well. And what's funny is they're starting to. It was a much bigger sell a few years ago, I will say. They were more resistant at the time, but now they're calling us. PayPal wants to talk to us. E-Trade wants to talk to us. Stripe wants to talk to us. So they're getting it. They're like really seeing the magic of what's happening, and they want to be a part of it. They're actually stoked. They're a little nervous, and we'll cover why here in a few minutes. But protocols will eat everything is a core tenet of what we're working on here, and they know it, we know it, so now the next steps are figure out how to work together. Okay, so this is kind of segueing into the next big assumption that we have to make, which is that traditional consumer finance applications will have to integrate DeFi to stay alive. This one's maybe a little bit more of a hot take. I know it sounds kind of crazy to say that if PayPal never integrates Uniswap liquidity, they're not going to make it, but I think it's a real thing. Their users want what we have, right? Their users want ultimate flexibility, ultimate optionality, 100% uptime. They want the ability to join this tokenized world, this tokenized ecosystem. You're already seeing it at Robinhood, all these various consumer fintech applications where things like Dogecoin have exploded in popularity. Am I a little bit sad that Dogecoin is sort of most people's entree into crypto this year? A little bit, but I'll take what we can get. The point is that these consumer fintech businesses, which we thought were going to move so slowly, are actually starting to come on board and say, hey, this is what we want to give the people what they want, right? They're a consumer-facing application, and so they're listening to their consumers, and the consumers are saying, we want more of this, and they're coming to us and saying, how can we give them more of these random dog coins that they would like to interact with? And we're saying, let's figure it out. Okay, so that's another big assumption that we have to make to move forward with this stuff. However, we have some challenges to adoption, as I'm sure you guys can imagine. It is not easy, or yeah, this has never been done before, right? Uniswap Labs has built a protocol that runs, it works, it cannot be shut down by any government, any entity. If everyone on the Uniswap team died in a car crash or a plane crash or something, the thing would keep running without us, and that's beautiful. But these guys don't really understand that. When they have a conversation with a service provider or a software provider, they are usually having a whole suite of tools that's ready for them to plug in, that matches perfectly with their backend, because whoever's trying to sell them that software has done all of the research that is necessary to go into their backend systems. So we come to them and we say, all right, well, so there's this thing, and it's called the blockchain, and there's a bunch of computers all over the world. You know the story that I'm telling. And they're just like, what do you mean? Just help us figure out how to get there. So there are some challenges to adoption. The first big one, and I'm sure that there are probably some other DeFi projects in the room that are facing this one, is the KYC issue, the elephant in the room. And there's lots of different versions of the KYC problem. Some of it are that just, DeFi doesn't do it at all. That's sort of a base case problem for a lot of these consumer fintechs. But I think, in my experience, and all of this, by the way, is just from my experience, like trying to work with these companies, and just so I can share with you guys so that you can all kind of do the same. But in my experience, the biggest problem that we're having right now around this whole like KYC problem is that no one really knows what KYC actually means. So we have tons of different organizations. You've got everything from sort of crypto-focused hedge funds and neobanks, which, they may view KYC as being just like someone has checked a box that says I'm not a terrorist, and that's enough. And then you've got, on the far other end of the spectrum, Bank of America, who, would like to offer more of these products to their clients, but they have to go through full, passports and biometrically scan and, have a letter from your grandmother saying you're a good person, that kind of thing. And the problem with this is that there's not a really good way that we have found so far to standardize this. Every different type of organization that's going to want to interact with Uniswap is going to have different layers of requirements. What we're doing right now, just to give you guys an idea of how we're tackling the problem, is we're in a deep research phase where we're talking to every single consumer fintech, every single institutional user that might be interested in engaging with our products and is having problems because of this issue, and figuring out like what's their lowest barrier to entry. What's like the minimum that we need KYC-wise in order to get them over the hump of being able to deploy liquidity to Uniswap, trade on Uniswap, whatever that is. Our plan is to go from there and build a product in partnership with them, by the way, which is really cool because KYC products are not our bailiwick, we're protocol builders. So we're gonna help them build something that'll allow them to sort of plug into this ecosystem and into this world. And I'm sure that lots of other of the DeFi projects will end up working on this together because it's a problem that everyone is trying to solve. But just so you know how we're trying to tackle it, we're getting in there with them. We're talking about what they actually need, what are the individual hurdles for each different type of org, and basically trying to come up with a solution for that, which is covering the most people. Next one, consumer fintech is scared of transacting on chain. They're not very comfortable with the idea that transactions are permanent. I don't know if any of you have ever had a transaction with PayPal that has gone awry. Maybe you sent some money to an eBay seller. Does anyone remember eBay? And the item never arrived, whatever it is. Well, what does PayPal do? They send you your money back, and there's a dispute resolution system, and everybody's happy. Well, there's no dispute resolution center as far as I've been able to tell. Has anyone found one? I don't think there's any way to withdraw your transactions on chain, and this scares the living shit out of them. They're not used to this intense level of strictness, basically, because the way the traditional financial system works, is so much more malleable than that. And by malleable, I mean they're keeping spreadsheets of who has what, and if they make a mistake or someone makes a mistake, they can go in and edit the spreadsheet and update it. We can't do that on the blockchain. So they're very scared of transacting on chain. I think they're starting to get more comfortable with it though. They're starting to understand what it means. I think for the challenge here is like educating their users basically about what that means. And that's that whenever we talk to them about their fears around this, they're understanding that part of their responsibility as an application that's going to be offering these things is to basically be explaining what's happening if they are going to allow on-chain transactions. You have sort of different, various different, I would say, levels of consumer fintech integration happening, by the way. Like, some of them want to actually be able to offer on-chain transactions directly to their users. Some of them, like PayPal, for example, wants to abstract all of that out to something like Paxos, which is sort of like a middleware solution, if you will, that has kind of sort of white-labeled exchange capability for PayPal. And so there's a gamut of how intense they're trying to get, but in general, most of the consumer fintech companies that I have spoken to are looking to stay away from transacting directly on chain. What does that mean? That means there's a huge opportunity actually for I'm calling them middleware solutions, but companies which are actually building the tech that lets Robinhood talk to Uniswap, but what doesn't have to have Robinhood customers talking to Uniswap. And so I think there's a lot of cool entrants to that market right now. It's actually being disrupted quite a bit. I think there's some kind of there's some market leaders at the moment, but there are also some new kids on the block who I think are doing really well, and we're working with and speaking with all of them to try to figure out some solutions to some of this stuff. Okay, other challenges. Oh, sorry, that was it. That was it on the major challenges. Here's why they're going to integrate Uniswap anyway. They have to stay relevant with their user base. As I mentioned, their user base is asking them, and that has actually been a really cool thing for me to hear, because I've been beating down their doors for 3 years trying to talk to them about this stuff, and the first 2 years didn't go that well, but this third year they've actually come to us and said, okay, we have a lot of users that have been asking us about this and we want to know more. And that has been really cool. And not just Uniswap, but just in general, users, retail markets, the way that people think about investment and retail money is changing, and people want more control over it. With the Robinhood, GameStop thing, right? You're starting to see that this generation of investors has a different idea about how they can and should be spending their money, and so to stay relevant with their user base is a huge, huge reason that all of these giants are starting to really look closely at working with something like Uniswap. This one is very interesting. So most of them, this is another reason why they're going to integrate Uniswap anyway, even though they are a bit scared of it. The traditional market makers that they're working with are not enough. Good example here, I recently spoke with Robinhood, and they said, okay, well, they have their own internal system for setting up. When someone places a crypto order on Robinhood, there is a set of market makers that they're working with. For each of those, let's say it's 10 different market makers, right? For each of those market makers, they have a daily limit of what they're able to interact with them that they've agreed to. And at the end of, and that daily limit can't move up or down, but also they have all of these various settlement practices with each one that's different. And so they have to settle basically at the end of the day across all these different market makers that they've been working with that all have different rules and all have different limits, and they're the biggest consumer financial application in the world, and they're trying to get throughput, and they can't. Traditional market makers cannot do it on their own, and so they need deeper pools of liquidity that's instant, that has finality, that they don't have to settle in such a archaic way, and they're tired of it, which is cool. So that makes my conversations with them a lot more simple. One of the cool things we've actually been talking about with them is like a way to use Uniswap to actually automatically settle a trade, for example, right when it happens with the user, and then you can basically push that order through order flow through your traditional market making system, settle it all at the end of the day in your kind of like normie TradFi way. But at the moment of order, you have instant execution on Uniswap, which would make things much simpler for them from an accounting perspective. So that's very exciting. So they're going to do this because what they have right now is not working. I kind of already touched on this, but settlement is overly complex and is costing them actually a lot of money. So the way that Robinhood, for example, makes money, I don't know how many of you are familiar with payment for order flow, but essentially they get paid to route all of your orders that you place via your app to big market makers and banks. And basically, right now in crypto, they don't have sort of depth and breadth enough in those spaces. And so what they're having to do is basically, it's eating into the fees that they would otherwise be making. And so they're actually losing money, and they don't like that. So this is actually, something like Uniswap is actually something, well, once we get it on Optimism, is something that we can really help them save costs with, which is fantastic. Okay, this is another really big one that gets them very excited. I like to tell them that, barring a large asteroid colliding with the surface of the planet Earth, Uniswap will continue to run because it's on chain, it's already deployed, and we couldn't turn it off if we wanted to. They need 100% uptime. These exchanges are experiencing, or these consumer applications, they're all competing with each other, right? And their job is to deliver a delightful, easy brokerage experience to their users so that their users will remain loyal to them, so that they don't switch to E-Trade or Robinhood or the guy down the street. Well, when you have every single time the places that they're sourcing liquidity from goes down in a day of high market volatility, that's not a delightful experience for your users. So Uniswap can sell them the beautiful dream of 100% uptime for users on any token pair, which is fantastic. It's a message that they're very excited about. I would add here that they're really interested in trading Bitcoin as well. And right now, I feel like Bitcoin trading on DeFi is not great. Like there's a decent amount of liquidity in wrapped Bitcoin, but not to the amount that we would need to get to in order to really compete with some of these centralized exchanges for the liquidity for consumer fintech. So, just as a side note, if anyone's thinking about what can I do to help DeFi, maybe it's something around getting more Bitcoin on and making it easier to use and all of those things. But yeah, 100% uptime is huge for them. So, what is Uniswap doing today to help them integrate? We're doing a few things. Mostly we're just being extremely persistent, but we have a couple of other strategies aside from that. I talked a little bit about middleware partnerships. So here are a few of the companies that we're talking to and working with about integrating Uniswap and pushing those things forward. With each of these, we're having a different conversation. There's always some questions or challenges. We're trying to solve them together, but these are the kind of 3 that we've identified so far. If anyone has any other ones that they would recommend, I would be all ears after this talk. We're very much looking to figure out this middle piece so that we can just plug into these apps really easily and move forward. The second thing that we are doing is experimenting with KYC solutions. Now, don't get too excited. No, this does not mean that uniswap.org is going to become a KYC portal anytime soon. What it means is that we are trying to figure out, okay, there's a certain subset of users or applications that would like to be Uniswap users that can't unless they have some KYC hurdle met. And so we're trying to figure out what are those hurdles, how do we get over them, and what are the solutions we can build with you guys to sort of experiment with this stuff and see if it works. And the third thing, and hey Marvin, welcome to my talk. That's our Chief Legal Officer right there. He's amazing. The third thing that we are doing is developing strong legal narratives to help with compliance discussions. I cannot tell you how much of my calls that I have with each of these different types of groups is about, well, compliance says blah, 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 blah. And so, sorry, I didn't mean to say blah, 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 Marvin. I know it's important. But what we're doing and what Uniswap Labs is working on, both internally and with the new DeFi Education Fund, is actually helping to develop stronger legal narratives around everything that we're doing, not just Uniswap, but DeFi in general. And those have been helpful in the discussions that we're having with compliance offices sort of across the board. So yeah. That is actually, I'm sorry, I forgot to put an end slide with my Twitter and everything, but you guys could just search for me. That's pretty much it for me. If you guys have any questions, I'll be in the back afterwards, or maybe just outside the room for whoever's coming on next. Thanks for coming.